before, standing in the name of Senator Hanson-Young, relating to a reference to the Environment and Communications Legislation Committee.
Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I move the motion. This motion, of course, is in relation to the government's legislation that was put into the House of Representatives last week, tabled in the House, that is going to weaken Australia's environmental laws. It's going to weaken the ability for the federal government and the Commonwealth to ensure that we protect Australia's most iconic places, our special species, and the wildlife that Australians right around this country and indeed the world hold dear. This legislation is a carbon copy of the Tony Abbott bill from 2014, and it's very disingenuous of the government to put forward this bill without, of course, any other process, because we know that the government has been saying for the last few months now that they would be insisting on a piece of legislation that would mirror, or at least reflect, the recommendations from the Graeme Samuel review. That, of course, is the independent review done into the EPBC Act. That is, of course, the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, the current law that is meant to look after our environment. That review has been 10 years waiting, and it's still ongoing. We haven't got the final report. The interim report, which was tabled in June, made it very clear that what we need is stronger environmental protection, not weaker, stronger, because our environment is at breaking point. Our environment is at a point where the decline is so bad that if we don't do something, it is simply unsustainable. The rate of extinction of Australian species is just unimaginable. Climate change, land clearing, pollution is pushing our environment to crisis point and our native species into extinction. What we need is stronger environmental protection and an independent watchdog to make sure those rules are put into place, that those standards are upheld. But what this government has done is introduced a piece of legislation that simply hands over powers for approvals to the states and the territories. And why, Madam Deputy President, does the government want to do this? Well, just the same reason they wanted to do this in 2014 under the leadership of Tony Abbott, and it's to make it easier for big miners and big developers to get approval for projects that are going to damage or be harmful to the environment. And the government today is arguing that we need it because of COVID-19. They're doing it under the cover of the pandemic crisis. It is so cynical. It is absolutely cynical and terrible that this government is prepared to sacrifice Australia's already damaged environment, suffering environment, in order to do what it is that these corporations have wanted for a long time, and that's an easy ride through the environmental approval process. Well, this Parliament and this Senate needs to stand up to this government and to say that this will go to a proper inquiry. We need to make sure we scrutinise it. It is our job as legislators to do that. And there should be no more passing of or no more progress of this legislation in this place until there has been a full-blown Senate inquiry. At the very least, we should in fact be waiting until the final report is tabled, which won't be until October the 31st. That's what we should be waiting on. We shouldn't be allowing this government to rush through legislation that is going to trash our environment even more. Heaven knows what happens when there isn't strong enough environment protections, when the states make the decisions. You end up seeing Rio Tinto blowing up ancient Aboriginal artefacts. You see state governments wanting to dam the Franklin or argue for coal seam gas to be expanded in the Northern Territory and New South Wales. We can't trust this government They want us to just rush this legislation through with no inquiry, with a nod and a wink that it'll all be okay. Well, we don't trust you. This must be inquired into, and this motion must send the legislation
Thank you,
off
Senator
to
Hanson-Young.
inquiry.
Your time has expired.